All right, so for this little video, we're going to talk about thermoregulation. We're going to talk about mechanisms. And so we'll start with insulation. One is adipose tissue, which is fat tissue. And so if you've ever, if you are larger or you've ever lived with somebody larger, they're always warmer. If you live with somebody very thin, they always want the heater on and you just want to kill them. Just kidding. But anyway, so adipose tissue, obviously. And then modified in marine mammals that spend a lot of time in water, this would be blubber, which is a very, very thick, dense layer of adipose tissue. This is actually a picture of seal blubber. And then hair and feathers, again, in endotherms, animals that moderate their temperatures, one is, the way to do that is hair and feathers. That is a covering to help warm yourselves up. And what happens with hair and feathers also is you can actually trap air underneath that hair or underneath the feathers, and that will actually help hold on the heat. That's how a wetsuit works. If you've ever worn a wetsuit and you jump into the water with a wetsuit on, the water's cold. But what happens is the water gets up and underneath that suit, and as it does, your body then warms that water layer. And now, as long as you stay wet, you will stay warmer. And so the same thing with hair and feathers is if you ever watch your dog or cat, they'll fluff up when it's cold because they're trying to trap that layer of air underneath their fur. Birds will do this; they'll fluff out and try to get air underneath the feathers. And when we get cold, we're not as hairy as we used to. We wear clothes now, but when we get cold, we get goosebumps. And goosebumps are actually the little pili, the little muscles that are trying to raise your hair so they can trap that air, and we no longer have that. So you end up getting cold. Of course, I don't know you that well. We haven't been in class, so maybe you are that hairy. Not judging. It's not like I'm not. So, but anyway, so one mechanism. Other is circulatory adaptations, vasodilation and vasoconstriction. Your blood vessels. Vasodilation means they get larger, and constriction means they contract. So whether they're thicker or smaller. And it turns out vasodilation adds more surface area that allows for heat loss. And vasoconstriction is it tightens up to actually hold on to heat. And so that's why when people get really, really warm, they start to turn red. That's vasodilation. Their body is trying to lose those heat. And so your vessels are dilating. And then vasoconstriction is your skin actually looks bluish, I guess, is what they say. And that's because, again, the blood vessels are constricting, pulling away from that skin. And so that's one mechanism. Also, another circulatory adaptation is something some animals have called counter-current heat exchange, or having a counter-current heat exchanger. And you can see three different examples of this. And what's happening is your blood leaving your core, coming out of your heart, is going to be very warm. And so what these organisms have done is allowed their extremities to get cooler. And so what happens is countercurrent means the arteries and veins run very close together. And so what's happening is as the blood is leaving from the core of your body, the blood from the vein is colder, and it's actually transferring heat to warm that blood back up before it hits your heart. And so you can see there's quite a bit difference between the temperature in the core versus the temperature down at the foot, or the end of a flipper, or a fin. And so lots of different animals, typically larger animals, have this ability. It's called countercurrent heat exchange. All right, evaporative cooling. You can see here in some of the celebs is basically sweating. We spend lots of money trying not to sweat, but it's actually trying to cool our bodies off. When I take field trips with some of the classes, we've been out in the heat, 110, 115 degree temperature occasionally. And what I'm always looking for is not sweating. I'm looking for the lack of sweating, because if somebody has gone through stopped sweating, that means they've gone into they've got major problems. Your body is completely shut down. And so that is a sign that you are in trouble. All right. Not all animals have sweat glands all over their bodies like us, and horses, another example. So they'll use panting. They look for a large wet surface. So the tongue is a very good example of one. And then some birds have these little sacs with a lot of blood vessels inside them right here. And these are cormorants. And so what they'll do is a gular flutter. The gular is this little pouch right there below their neck. And what you'll see is their mouth will be open like this. And you'll see this little pouch kind of bounce up and down, pushing air across those blood vessels to lose heat. All right, thermoregulate behavioral responses. Some of the behaviors we'll do is, here we got a bunch of hippos. They spend most of their day in the water. They don't really have a lot of hair, a lot of skin protection. And so to cool themselves off, because they're such a large animal, they'll spend the day in the water. On the right, you actually have a dragonfly trying to stay cool, but straight up in the air to reduce how much sun is actually hitting any one part of it. They can also orient themselves to the sun to actually warm up in the morning. So animals will cluster or clump together when they're cold. And so here are some macaques that are very, very cold. And this kind of cool, here's birds and they'll sit in the shade. And if there's no shade, there's a light pole. And they're all kind of standing in the shade along that line, which is kind of interesting. But so behavioral things: get out of the sun, position less to the sun, get in the water, too cold, cuddle. All right, heat production, thermogenesis. We get cold, we shiver. Actually, one of the best ways to stay warm is to keep moving. Anytime your muscles twitch, they're putting off heat as a byproduct, second law of thermodynamics. And so that will help. There's also non-shivering thermogenesis, where your mitochondria will actually increase its production and put off small bits of heat. So even when we're not our muscles are not physically twitching, our cells can produce some heat. That's something newer they found. And then we've got brown fat. And as you get older, you have less and less brown fat. Certain animals, grizzly bears, have lots of brown fat. They've got a kind of a bunch right up above their neck. But you can see it in a human, an adult human here. And brown fat generates more heat than yellow fat, which is your typical. And here we have an insect showing that they can also thermogenerate. And so a little thermogenesis here. And again, they have to warm up, they're doing that to get their core body temperature up. They're a large insect, so for them to fly, it's going to take a little bit of time. And with that, we will stop the mechanisms.